getting all these little dings going on my computer. Right, okay. Let's make a start. So, good afternoon. I'm Jane Johnston, co-CEO of AphA, and today we have presenting for us Matt Oakes, who is Head of Intelligence and Analytics at Sherwood Forest Hospitals Foundation Trust, and he's going to do his session on an analyst perspective of the FTP. Before we start, just to let you all know, the session is being recorded and will be shared on the AphA website afterwards. So if you want to go back and check on anything, pick up on anything that you might have missed, or even, you know, any of your member colleagues that might have missed it, they can go in and catch up. I could just ask, please, for everybody to make sure they are on mute for the length of the presentation. And obviously at the end, when we have Q&A, you know, you can come off if you stick your hand up, but also use the chat to ask questions, and everything will be covered Q&A wise at the end. Quick update on next month's sessions. So we have on Tuesday, 2nd of September, Alex Bottle, who's Professor of Medical Statistics at Imperial College, doing a session for us on getting the most out of messy NHS data. And on Tuesday, the 16th of September, John O'Connell, who's Director of Strategic and Service Innovation at South Central West CSU, and who I think is on the call today as well, maybe. He will be doing a session on AI, digital and data readiness across the NHS teams. There will not be one a fortnight after that, the 30th of September, because we have our AphA conference on the 1st of October. So the 2nd of September Lunch and Learn, the 16th of September Lunch and Learn, and the AphA conference are all on your events page on the website. There's limited tickets left for the conference, so please do go in and register your interest in any of those, which are all obviously free to our members. And with that, I will now pass over to Matt, and I'll turn myself off and let Matt talk you through his session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. I'm just going to share my screen. If somebody could just give me a thumbs up if you can see that, just to make sure it's working okay. Thank you very much. So yeah, thank you everybody for joining us. The last time I ran this, so this session is basically a repeat of what we did a month or so ago. The last time I did this, I was in the office, and the fire alarm went off while I was talking. So that's not going to happen today because I'm at home. So this is my perspective on the federated data platform. Just to introduce myself, so I am Head of Intelligence and Analytics at Sherwood Forest. I've been in the NHS for 13 years-ish in analytical BI roles. I've worked across CSUs, commissioning, acute trusts. I've led data engineering teams, data science teams, analytics teams. I was part of the NHS Digital Academy. I am a very proud member of AphA and honoured to speak to you all today. I am an advanced practitioner with FedIP, and I'm part of the CDAO network. That's enough bragging from me about stuff. I've had a lot of opportunities to kind of get involved over the last 13 years, and I've tried to take as many of them as possible. So from a personal point of view, I'm often described as relentlessly optimistic, which I mean by that, I mean when it comes to problems or anything like that, I usually have quite a can-do attitude about being able to solve them. I think that we can do a lot when we put our minds to it. I'm quite creative. I am quite unconventional. The keen-eyed amongst you might have noticed that I'm a musician, and I am a collector of expensive hobbies. So I play musical instruments. I also build musical instruments. I also like to make other things as well, much to my wife's chagrin. So what makes me qualified to talk about this subject? Well, as I mentioned, I've led data engineering teams in the NHS, I've used data platforms across a number of organisations and observed quite a lot about them. And my organisation is going through a bit of a transformation at the moment in implementing the FDP into what we do. So I've had a bit of exposure to it, but I've also had quite a bit of exposure to other data platforms. I was involved in building a cloud-based data platform in a previous role, so got my hands dirty and real understanding of kind of what makes a good data platform versus what all the pitfalls are. Bit of small print for you. I'm not an expert, so while I do have some insight, I'm not an absolute expert in the FDP. I don't know everything about it. I have, used it a little bit and had a lot of conversations with the FDP team, lots of demos and things like that. Have got my hands on it a little bit as well, but I'm not an expert in it completely. I don't work for Palantir or NHS England, nor are they paying me. So if I say nice things about any of them, then it's genuinely because I believe it to be. I'm also not going to discuss any opinions about Palantir themselves, about politics or morality. I know that it's a contentious subject, but I'm not going to go there with this. These are my opinions. Everybody's entitled to theirs, and the opinions do differ across people who've had their hands on this. This is unlikely to answer all of your questions. It may answer some of them, but I would encourage you to stay curious and find things out for yourselves as much as you possibly can and test things yourselves. What you can expect from me today is honesty, my personal experience of working with the FDP and other data platforms, and of course, relentless optimism. So FDP, what's it got to do with analysts and other data professionals? Well, to get to understand what my sort of understanding of the FDP is and my opinions on it, you've really got to understand what I think about data platforms in general. And so thought I would start with some quotes genuine quotes that I've heard, some of these things I've said about data warehouses in the NHS. So things like, how many times have you been asked to do an analysis and you don't have that data in the data warehouse yet? It's sat in a system somewhere. We don't have any DBAs. We don't have people who can maintain data warehouses and things like that. If we only just had 2 more data engineers, we might be able to do something, but we just don't have enough things. Analysts often ask things like, can we just create a separate database over here that I can do my own thing in, because the main data platform isn't really quite fit for purpose. We can't do things because our version of SQL is unsupported. About this one, every time someone makes a change, it breaks everything else. There's a whole raft of things that we have, all kinds of complaints about data warehouses there. Data warehouses fall over and fail a lot, things like that. What about multiple versions of the truth as well? So, we're not sure which table to use. We have 6 tables that are all supposed to say the same thing, but they're all very different. What happens when contractors come along and build stuff in the data warehouse and it's a black box and nobody knows how to support it, that sort of thing. We get blamed when the data's bad, but it's wrong at the source. Any of that sound familiar to people? That for me is a few things that kind of encompass some of the things that just are problematic about existing data warehouses in the NHS. And the conclusion from this for me is that the foundations are really important. Right, so the foundations that you would use you can't build a mansion on the foundations for a beach hut, for example. A foundation is absolutely crucial to what you're then going to build on top of it. It limits what you can build on top of it. So if you want to build a mansion, you have to build a foundation that's suitable for that mansion. There's no point building one that's suitable for a beach hut and then expecting to build something incredible on top of it. So this is kind of my checklist really for firstly, these are the issues that I find with a lot of legacy NHS data platforms. And then I've got a bit of a checklist for what makes a good data platform. So issues with many legacy data platforms. Obviously, some people have conquered some of these. Some of these persist, but a lot of them are fragile. They're easily broken. So a little bit of erroneous data comes through, and you can say goodbye to your data for that day while the data engineering team fix the data warehouse. Often they're system centric, so they perpetuate siloed data. We've got that siloed data in lots of different systems in the NHS. If your data warehouse is structured in a system by system kind of way, then you're basically keeping that data in those silos. Analysts, data professionals, they need to spend time wrangling the data. They don't get to spend time adding value. They have to spend a lot of their time actually pulling the data together from lots of different places. The architecture starts with good intentions, but then it falls victim to workarounds. So you can see that happen as like a nucleus of a good practice, little nice star schema in your data warehouse, and then everything else is a mess around it, just because we've got to get things done now, and there's a lot of technical debt there. Often limited to what the IT department can provide in terms of compute power and storage and all that sort of stuff. Never really resourced to do this well in organizations. So organizations generally don't have one or two data engineers who can prop up their data warehouse. If that, they don't have an awful lot of resource to be able to do this stuff with excellence. And a lot of data platforms don't have the ability to sort of share data beyond internal use without having to go down a lot of different routes. So my sort of checklist for addressing the issue. So what does a data platform have to be good in my view? It has to be scalable, stable, secure. It should be patient-centric or thematic. It shouldn't be system-centric. It shouldn't matter which system captured the data. You should be able to go in and see tables that reflect a patient journey or reflect the theme of what's happening in that particular area. It should then bring data across multiple systems together. It should be future-proof, so it should be able to handle changes. So when we have a new system, it shouldn't then break everything that we've got or add layers of complexity to it. It needs to let analysts be analysts and data scientists be data scientists, etc. Really, it needs to allow, like this graphic kind of shows, the analysts to analyze, communicate, add value to the data without hindering. It should enable advanced analytics and data science. It should have that embedded within the platform rather than data science happening over here in another corner with its own set of outputs. It should be able to integrate the outputs of data science into the platform so that people can use them. So if we've got a predictive model, then we can see that in our data warehouse with the data that it's relevant to. It should be transparent. It shouldn't be a black box. It should have transparent data lineage. So we should be able to track where the data has gone, what it's connected to, how it's engineered. And it should integrate the ability to interact with data beyond just consumption. So you should be able to then do other things with that data, add to it, not just read from it, for example. And we'll come back to that in a bit. So by those standards, I think the FDP is a good data warehouse, provided you can get your organization to engage with it properly. That's a big caveat because a lot of organizations may have signed an MOU, they may have dabbled in it or just taken an operational product, but haven't really embraced it fully. But it's also so much more than a good data warehouse. So let's talk a bit about what actually is it, because I'm sure that's a lot of you have heard of it, but don't actually know. You're wondering, well, what actually is this thing that we're talking about? So this is the tech bit. So Palantir have built a tool called Foundry, which is an operating system, effectively, that it orchestrates all of the infrastructure that sits underneath it. It's a graphical user interface for building tools. So it's a software development piece of software, effectively. It's also a data engineering piece of software that allows you to manage data flows and build and deploy data models and things like that, and pieces of analysis. And there's some data visualization stuff in there as well. That sits on top of infrastructure. So it sits on top of it's effectively Amazon Web Services, AWS. It's sat in the UK data center, and it's effectively split out by tenant. Every organization who's on the FTP gets their own tenants, their own environment, which is completely theirs, that they own. That include that, and it's based on a couple of different technologies. One is file storage, which is cloud file storage, and then the other one is a technology called Apache Spark and Data Fusion. And what that does is give you all of the compute power underneath it. Apache Spark is a massively distributed compute technology. You can look that up. I'm not an expert in it, but and I won't bore you with details. But if you want to have more details on how this is built, then speak to NHS England or Palantir. Who'll be able to give you a lot more understanding of how this works. This is something that they shared with me in terms of a sort of a bit more of a technical diagram. So you've got your data sources, and they go into the federated data platform. They go through data integration, an ontology layer, and then there are lots of different output layers that you can use to build analytics, data modeling, applications, things like that. Again, not going to go through this in lots of detail because you can get demos of these specific products from Palantir themselves or from NHS England. But this is kind of how it's sort of structured under the bonnet. So that's the technical bit. The NHS England bit, the program. So it started in 2023. The initial focus has been on operational products. So a lot of you will have heard about the operational products that they've been building, things like the RTT model, the inpatient so theatres model, various so there's Cancer 360 is one there as well. All of those tools are built on the Foundry application within that. So they're all sort of, if you like, open source, but within that platform. You built using those specific tools. The adoption has been voluntary, so it's not being mandated. It's been heavily encouraged, though, let's say. There are a number of incubator sites for different products across the country. Chelsea and Westminster are a notable one, and there are others built that are helping Palantir build products within the FDP, and sort of being the test bed for those products. The program was funded for 7 years. There is little word on what happens after that. We do keep asking, but it was something like £330 million contract awarded to Palantir to deal with all the infrastructure, the program, etc. There has been limited engagement with the analytics community, which we will come to a little bit later. But something that we are trying to rectify over time. What's the federated bit about then? Because that's a word that we haven't. It's not being used extensively across analytics, let's say, for us. But what that means is that the platform being hosted in the same environment in AWS means that we can expose elements of our tenant to other tenants across there without having to set up lots of infrastructure to transfer data. This part of the platform hasn't really been explored very much yet, but I know that there's a lot of plans to do that. There's a lot of plans to say have all of our statutory returns and things like that go over the FDP. At the moment, within Nottinghamshire, which is my sort of health economy, we're running a pilot to explore how this can work, where we can share some of the data that we already share with our ICB across our using our FTP tenants to do that, rather than having secure file transfer protocol kind of stuff going on in the background, or sending data over the open internet or things like that. We're looking at how we can make this work sort of elegantly, so that then we can share this and have it as a bit of a proof of concept for how it could happen, on a broader scale. So what are my opinions on it then? So there's positives and negatives here. So the good, I think the technology is fantastic. So AWS cloud platforms, if anybody knows anything about cloud platforms, they're always running on the most recent infrastructure, the infrastructure part's taken care of by the cloud supplier, in this case Amazon. It is a great foundation, which is what I've sort of talked about, and it ticks all of the boxes for certainly my criteria for what makes a good data warehouse. It also gives us the ability to have some standards that cross organizational boundaries. So there's something called the canonical data model, which I didn't choose the name, so don't shout at me. But that is it's a common data model across the NHS that NHS England are leading on. Palantir are building into the platform, and it does mean that we've got some standardization around the data model, which could enable things like reproducible analytical pipelines across organizations, shared products. I mean, it's one of the reasons why Palantir can go into an organization and deploy a product quite quickly, as we've seen in our organization, without having to build it from scratch, without having too much in terms of data wrangling and engineering, and the more that happens, the more organizations that take them on, the faster that they get, because they can reproduce parts of the pipelines that they've seen in other organizations. It democratizes the ability to do some tasks. So the fact that it's largely graphical user interface based, there are code based elements to it, but it is supposed to be a low code way of doing things. It means that some data engineering tasks, for example, that would have required an enormous amount of resource in terms of data engineering, can now be done by people who don't necessarily have all of the code based skills. It does take some heavy lifting out of that sort of thing. There are other things being built into it around LLMs, for example, so large language models and sort of Copilot-like interfaces. They're not available they're things that Palantir are talking about at the moment. It also has some data science tools built in. So I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier about what makes a good data platform. Around there's an element in there called modeling objectives, which enables you to create data models, assess the accuracy of those data science models, and then productionize them. So your outputs go straight into the ontology of the platform, and you're able to then use that in your analysis without then having to reacquire that data from CSV files elsewhere or whatever. Those data science tools being built in means that the whole process around being able to get data science outputs into the hands of decision makers will be a lot faster and a lot easier in the future as well. So they're the good things for me. The bad things, so of course I mentioned earlier, poor engagement with data and analytics professionals so far. The analysts haven't really had much of a seat at the table, which has been kind of disappointing for our profession, given that we're probably the prime users of data, and probably a really knowledgeable part of our organizations when it comes to how we could leverage data to help decision making. I think a lot of us would have liked to have been more involved in the design of this from a program point of view and things like that. Focus on operational products. A lot of organizations have adopted the products, and as a result, they've kind of felt a little bit, their data professionals have felt a bit done to, because they have had to implement this thing that they don't know an awful lot about, that they haven't got the foundational knowledge of. A bit like just having another piece of software in the organization to support, which makes people feel a little bit done to, and it's seen a little bit like a black box, because they haven't gone into the kind of the data lineage side of it and the platform side of it. No choice of supplier. So the supplier was awarded by NHS England at the start. This isn't really an issue for me. I quite like what Palantir have done with the software that they've got, but I know it will be an issue for some people. And then hubris. So there's been a level of arrogance, I think, from the program in general about it being the answer to everything, about it being able to do everything. And there's certain things that it's got limitations with. So, for example, at the moment, GP data doesn't exist in the FDP, and until it does, things like population health management is really hard to do. Some might say it's not possible to do. It's certainly not possible to do in a comprehensive kind of way unless you've got that GP data. Yet from the program, there's definitely been a level of hubris that says yes, we can do this. I think that's definitely been it's definitely put some people on the back foot, and it's hindered their engagement with some organisations. The unknown. So what happens after the 7-year funding runs out? I don't know. We don't know quite what that looks like yet. I know that there'll be a re-procurement, and what that looks like is going to be an interesting conversation. Is it going to be mandated? It's not mandated currently. Are the Department of Health at some point going to say, that's it, you've had enough time to think about it, you're all going for it, whether you like it or not? We don't know. What's the future cost of ownership? We don't quite know yet. You know, how's this going to integrate with more mature ICB platforms? A lot of ICBs have spent a lot of time and effort and money building their own platforms that have arguably better tools for certain things. Is it going to integrate with those well, or is it going to be a case of, no, you've got to dismantle what you've built, which I think might be a mistake. So those things we don't know about. Some questions around what did the CDAO network think about this? So I don't necessarily speak for the entire CDAO network, but I'm in the conversation, so I will try and represent the kind of views in a balanced way. So these are the sort of general views that I think that exist across the network. So there's generally broad support for the concept of federated data and the concept of a platform nationally where we can share data, and we can bring a level of consistency and things like that. And again, it does support some of the CDAO network sort of manifesto goals of things like we share everything we do. You know, having a platform where you've got common data models and things like that allows you to share more of what you do. So I think there's definitely support for that concept of how you do it. But there are concerns about how the implementation has gone so far, and it strays away a little bit from true federation of data, and it does risk sort of vendor lock-in, because we've got the Palantir Foundry software, which is very much a Palantir thing. There's it might bring disruption to existing local systems. So a lot of, as I mentioned, it's a major worry for a lot of CDAOs. Particularly ICBs, because they've got some ICBs have got some very mature tools in place that are really good. So there's a lot of questions about what is this going to mean for them. Are they going to have to do a lot of rework or in adopting this? There's definitely been a strong call for a program reset with co-creation and engagement in mind from the analytical community. Definitely been that lack of engagement, as I've mentioned, in its current state. There were several key asks that have been put out around things like automation of national returns, integration with national data, external data sets, and making sure that there's PCN level functionality included as well. Issues of trust remain unresolved, so particularly around sharing GP data, for example, and public confidence. And then the tone and messaging from NHS England, which has been seen as sort of inconsistent. It's very promotional. So the CDAO network's been calling for a lot more transparency and collaboration in this. What's been done about that? Well, some of you may have seen on LinkedIn and things like that. There's been some open letters between the CDAO network and Ming Tang, and they've definitely sparked discussions. Been in many of those discussions where we've had those conversations with Ming. AHUB, who's a program director, and Rebecca, they lead the program. We've had some very, very good engagement with them since those letters, and those discussions are ongoing. So we're definitely being seen as a sort of a critical friend to the program now, and I think that they're definitely seeking the support of the analytical community more now. We've now got some representation on the check and challenge group as part of the formal governance for the program as well. So that seat at the table that we were talking about, that's definitely started to happen, albeit a little late in the program for many people's liking. So that's CDAO network. What's our journey been like as a trust? So in a word, unconventional, and the program team would definitely agree with me on that. That's partly because I'm leading it. So I took I've led this from our trust perspective. My approach is that I wouldn't engage with it before being allowed to pursue the HDS, which is the data, what they've called the data warehouse element of it, which basically allows your data engineers and analysts to see the platform, use all of the tools within the platform, not just the products. We had a very rapid adoption and have used sort of an agile project approach, which is what we do anyway within our analytics team, but we've adopted that as an organization for this, and we've been quite iterative in how we've adopted it. The team, the program team explained or described our trust as having extreme organizational alignment. So we had information governance, we had the technical team, we had the data team onboarding, all lined up before we began the operational onboarding, and we made sure that everybody was very much on board with how we were going to do things, and working together on it rather than having sort of silos tripping each other up. And we absolutely took advantage of Palantir's support. So we basically had Palantir's data engineers do a lot of the heavy lifting for us, while our team are getting sort of getting up to speed with the platform themselves. There is a learning curve to the platform, so getting them up to speed is an ongoing journey for us. But we've in the meantime been using Palantir's data engineers to help us build quickly. Why do we do that? Well, we wanted to take advantage of the technology. The timing lined up perfectly with our situation as a trust. So we're at the very start of an EPR journey, and we want to use the FDP as effectively a single version of the truth that we can then use to help with the data migration and things like that. We've been able to see the potential in it and want to get in. We're not super early in the program, but we wanted to leverage it. So as soon as we were allowed to use more of the platform than just the operational tools, definitely saw the potential of being able to do that. And then the idea was to try and get us a seat at the table and help get that analytical seat at the table for us. So by really leading into the platform and taking a lot of it and going at this, sort of jumping into it with both feet, I've been able to help advise various things with Palantir and the NHS England team who are implementing it, and feel like I can be an analytical voice through in that program if I'm if we're doing it. It's easier to do that from within the program than from the sidelines, I think. So how could it help analysts? How could it help data professionals? Well, firstly, as I've mentioned a couple of times, it's honestly a good platform in my opinion. It's a good foundation for us. So if we have that as a foundation for our data, then we can do a lot with it. It's scalable, it's stable, it's secure, it's got many of the attributes, or almost all of the attributes that I said at the start is my definition of a good platform. It allows us to share what we do, which is a core component of the CDAO manifesto around being able to share what we do. It's a potential to be a platform for reproducible analytical pipelines, data science models. So if my colleague David Chapman, who's a chief data officer at Wigan, his data science team have built a data science model, then I should be able to use that. And if I've built a data science model, then somebody in the other end of the country should be able to use it without an awful lot of re-engineering, which at the moment is difficult when everybody's using something different. Reduce duplication and waste, frees up time. Again, time is absolutely critical, especially in the financial climate that we're in. being able to free up time to be able to allow analysts and data professionals to do more valuable things is absolutely critical. Helps remove technical debt. So this gives a clean slate for data platforms. A lot of data platforms are absolutely steeped in technical debt, and a lot of people are spinning plates trying to keep them up. This can help us get away from that. Helps bring analysts into the spotlight. So, really it's a data platform. This is where analysts can shine. We can use data for the benefit of patients and actually show what we can do as a profession. And there's a potential for upskilling and cross-skilling. So again, it's the democratization of some of those skills, because the technology is helping enable things using the sort of GUI low code approach to things. Also, it enables things like data science. There are code notebooks. You can use R, Python, SQL in there, and then you can, as I've said, they're integrated. You could be integrated into the platform with sort of validation of those tools. It does things like automatically create your ROC curve and various other validation tools to help you to take some of the heavy lifting away from doing that. So there's definitely potential for analysts and others to get involved in doing some of those things that might otherwise be exclusively available to data scientists, and might help people move around the profession in an easy way, help enable that. So what should we do as analysts then? Well, these are my recommendations of what you should do as a data professional around this. For a start, educate yourself. So first step of doing that is that you've come to this to hear me rabbit on about it for a little while. That's a good first step, but I would suggest doing more of that. Find out what your organizational strategy is for it. Go and have a chat with NHS England and Palantir about it. Get your CDAO to do that. And really learn about the platform. I don't think it's going anywhere. I think it's here to stay. So I think it's absolutely worth educating yourself on as an analytical professional. Suggest things. So if you've got ideas for what should be in the platform, then suggest them. The NHS England program team and Palantir are really open to suggestions. They've said no to almost nothing when it comes to what's being suggested to them in the past. I've given them an enormous shopping list of use cases, and they've said they haven't necessarily said yes to all of them, but it's either been a yes or a not yet, or a, well, you could do that yourself when your data team is up to scratch with how to do some of this stuff. So they're very open to use cases for the platform. And then the final thing is to stay curious about it. So keep your ear to the ground about what's happening, and keep asking questions. That's my presentation on this. I've noticed there are a few things in the chat, but I'm happy to take some questions and answer as much as I can on that. Don't know if Jane wants to come back in at all to facilitate that.
Certainly, thank you. Yeah, I've just tried to answer a couple of things that we've gone. Chandan just asked about the check and challenge, so I've put a link in there for the check and challenge group so you can see exactly what it is they do. John Stocker's just mentioned that the NHS is scheduled for demolition. Will the funding for the FDP continue? So I've just said, I mean, it's not a guarantee, that the FDP is mentioned in the 10-year plan, with expansion of its functionality being key part of it. So hopefully, and having spoken to Ming Tang, I believe that the funding is secure on that. So I don't think there's any, like you say, Matt, it's not likely to be going anywhere.
Just on that, I think that the principle around federated data is something that we absolutely have to do as an NHS. If we want to be actually using data in a smart way in the future, we've got to have a platform that allows standardization and things like that. So I think and this has evolved to a level now where I think it's got enough momentum to carry on. As things about the platform may change over time, suppliers may change, etc. Who knows? But the actual principle and the federation of data and a platform nationally has to remain if we're going to be smart as an NHS in the future.
Thank you. And also a couple more from Chandan. One is a comment about she was pleasantly surprised at the easily generated data visualizations. And also a question on the data science models, where would the validation and sign off happen before they start to be shared? So
yeah, so just on the first point on the data visualization side of it, there's a couple of data visualization tools within the platform. Contour and Quiver, I believe, are the two things that they're called. They are pretty straightforward to use once you get your head around sort of some of the initial learning curve around where to click for things. Yeah, they're meant to be quite straightforward to use. They're similar to Power BI in a lot of ways. As an organization, we're sort of sticking with Power BI as a data visualization platform just because we've got it quite well integrated into the organization. But getting the data from FDP into Power BI has been quite straightforward as well. So being able to create data sets that you then hook up to Power BI, etc. So there's a flexibility in there from that point of view as well. The data science model one is an interesting one because I think the platform enables automatically it enables you to do all kinds of things, but the tool in there that's called modeling objectives enables you to create your model and then test a model, and it will automatically do things, as I said, like create ROC curves and all of the stats, the validation stats around data science models about accuracy, sensitivity, specificity, all of that sort of stuff. And then it will allow you to publish that model into your ontology so you can use it. In terms of like sign off and validation, that's obviously organization by organization. You can decide what your governance is around that sort of stuff, but the platform is an enabler for it. So it's like I say, it's up to you. Who gets to press go when it comes to publishing the models, but it does give you the tools off the bat and a good practice around the validation sort of stats automatically off the back of your data science models.
a question there from Andrew Elliott. Can you automate extracts from the FTP for use by Power BI? So you've just kind of
absolutely, yeah. So we've got our RTT dashboard, for example, which is running off the FTP. So and it's almost live. So we've got basically got our RTT tool, which is our sort of single version of the truth for our waiting list. And then we've got a dashboard that we use internally that visualizes that for a broader range of people, just because we haven't given everybody in the organization access to the FTP. But we wanted a single version of the truth, so we made sure that the data set that is available in the FTP connects to Power BI and refreshes in time with that as well. So we've got effectively a single version of the truth with our PTL and everything, which is worked quite well. So yeah, it's quite straightforward to do that within the platform.
Right, Helena's got her hand up. Do you want to put your question to Matt?
Sure. Yes, it's probably a stupid question, but so you're primarily using it as your like primary data warehouse type thing. So can you put like, how much does the sort of canonical data models cover? Does it cover kind of all sorts of data? So we've got a fairly kind of well-developed SQL warehouse, and we can basically kind of get our hands on any sort of bit of information that comes out of our EPR. So can you kind of literally store anything in the FTP, or does it kind of sort of more those sort of primary data set things?
So not a stupid question at all, but the short answer is yes. You can store any of your organizational data in there if you use the HDS product. So we're talking to them about this being our only data platform in the future. We're not there yet with it, but we're on the journey for that. But we were basically the canonical data model is something that's being built sort of nationally. So there's a national Git repository and things like that with what the structure of that is that I'm sure we can find a link to. But that's published nationally, so it doesn't cover everything. That's the part that's going to be common to all organizations who take that. And it enables things like the products to be the same in each organization, or use the same product in each organization, because you're conforming your data first to that model. But that model isn't going to cover everything. So your ontology layer can include all kinds of things that are outside of that canonical data model. It obviously, the more you've got outside of the canonical data model, the less of that you'll be able to sort of share across organizations, because it'll be, the canonical data models also being kind of evolved over time, from what I understand. So and it's not just the Palantir thing, that's an NHS England or DH thing in the future. So but yeah, the simple answer is yes, you can put any of your data up there, and we're looking at all kinds of use cases beyond the canonical data model, for what we need to do with our data internally and across our things like the ICB and other trusts as well, in our region. How do we make use of that kind of federation for things? We're all in our sort of health economy. We're all sort of in East Midlands. We've all signed up to the same EPR supplier as well, so it'll be really useful to have that kind of level of consistency. But in health economies where they don't have the same systems, that canonical data model is probably a really good way of then being able to try and achieve some of the same things, because you'll have that layer of standardization there in the FTP.
And then how do you actually how do you query, is it all GUI based then for querying the data?
No, there are GUI based tools in there, but there are also code based tools. So you can still use SQL, Python, R to do various things in there. They've made the tools quite comprehensive. So I mentioned about things like being able to do data engineering. So there's visual data lineage within there, so you can visually see how things are connected to each other, and you can build pipelines in a visual way. But you can also build, use SQL code and things like that to build the logic within them as well. It just means that the platform makes it a very visual way of being able to get to and see how that stuff works.
Right. I think if we go to Sarah's question in the chat first and then over to Ella. So Sarah is asking about the GP data. It's interesting because she's saying, can you extract the data at patient level from the FTP and join to the GP data in the existing warehouse, which is different to, can we bring the GP data into the FTP? Because I think there's a lot of issues with GPs without data going into FTP. So
yeah,
you want to cover that one?
Short answer is probably yes, you could probably do that, what you've suggested there. I think you need to have a conversation with your again, this is about what your organizational strategy is for it, and conversations with NHS England and Palantir about what the use cases are for your organization. But I think that, and this is what I was saying earlier about that a lot of systems have got their own tools that have got GP data in them, and they've built that trust with GPs over time. That doesn't exist with the FTP yet, so the organisation is going to have to find some solutions to be able to say, well, actually, we could take some data out of the FTP, put it into a different platform, and join it up there, or use some form of data mesh type technology or something like that. I don't have all of the answers to that, but I think that there's definitely going to be some potential solutions that organizations are coming up with. I know that in our health economy, Jack Rodber from NOTS ICB is having these kinds of conversations with Palantir and NHS England at the moment. But again, I think it's trying to get your whoever is representing you on the CDAO network to have those conversations about how ICBs can do some of this. I'm not as close to the ICB kind of stuff because of being in an acute, but But yeah, there's definitely, you can definitely extract your data from the FDP into something else, which, you know, it does allow you to do that. Your data doesn't have to stay there. Obviously, they want you to use that, but that's, you know, the possibilities are there to get the data out and put it somewhere else if you need to.
Thank you. Right, over to Ella. Do you want to put your question to Matt?
Yeah, just first to say thanks very much. It's a really kind of clear and quite optimistic presentation, which I found really beneficial. So my perspective is perhaps slightly different because I work on national audits. And so, again, I'm relatively new to the structure of the NHS and data flow, so please do feel correct my understanding. But in terms of the data flow, obviously, you know, providers submit their data through electronic health records and then systems, and then that gets submitted to, for sort of, I guess, disease registration purposes, to NDRS, so the National Disease Registration Service. My understanding that's part of NHS England, and they have a number of outputs in terms of data quality and certain cancer stats that they have dashboards, both for trust to access internally and then also public facing. And then we're, I guess, a layer on top of that in that we have specific indicators that we report on sort of semi-regular basis. So I just wondered how far the FDP goes. It sounds like, you know, the federated element allows, you know, maybe sort of trusts within a specific region to kind of, you know, share data or models that are developed. But I just wondered, given that like NDRS is part of NHS England, I presume NDRS could then pull nationally, you know, certain data about, for example, you know, certain types of cancer. They could pull that from all sort of providers to get a kind of, would that help with kind of NDRS data curation? And then I guess, you know, we're sort of external to NHS England, so we're slightly, you know, kind of separate entity. But I just wondered, from the federated element, the sort of national bodies and sort of disease registration service, would the FDP also help with that?
I think so. I think this is like we're at the start of a journey with this. So nationally, I think there's been the intention to have some kind of national, you know, the NHS's data nationally for a long time, and a lot of those programs have failed over the years. But a lot of them failed before they even got off the ground. I think the FDP's the furthest we've ever got when it comes to a national view of NHS data. And I think the ambition is to absolutely be able to support that kind of thing in the future. I can't speak for the program, but the conversations that I've had have been that, well, if we can pool the data together and we've got a technical mechanism to be able to do this securely and share and get this data collated securely, then it'll absolutely be able to support things like what you've described there. Again, those specific use cases, you'd need to speak to NHS England about whether they've thought about that yet, or whether it's on the roadmap, or when it might be on the roadmap. But I think that you know, it's these kind of use cases about being able to say, if we could just get all of the providers' data on this particular subject together, we'd be able to actually answer some really important questions. I think that's the absolutely the kind of use cases for FDP in the future. How far off that we are is a different question, because I think it relies on all of the trusts in the country and different providers to be able to actually go and adopt it and you know, put their data in there. And at the moment, with that being voluntary, some trusts are definitely holding out for not doing that. Some ICBs aren't really playing with it yet. And I think they want people to want to use it, and that's why it's stayed voluntary. So, but yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's something that, again, I think it's worth asking NHS England on what their intentions are. And again, from the questions from the analytical community on this, is, I think, would absolutely demonstrate that we really want that seat at the table, and we want to be, you know, shaping how this looks and what we could use this kind of thing for in the future. So.
Perfect. Thanks very much.
Right. Thank you, Matt. So we're just coming up to the end. Just a couple. Oh, okay. I'll let someone else talk instead of me. So, Robert, do you want to just quickly get your question in?
Thanks, Justin, under the wire. Thanks, Matthew. It's really interesting. I work in a team of analysts in NHS England, and we're just sort of getting our regional workstations set up and getting going with it. My question is really about sort of analysts in your organisation and some of the RAP principles that you mentioned. So some of our team have concerns about Palantir being less wrap based because than what we currently have, because it's sort of Palantir native tools. There is that sort of fear about potentially isolating ourselves from the sort of wider analytical community. But it's really, so I guess the question is really is about onboarding analysts. Have they found it in terms of, you know, where they write code within code workbooks, how they work, the sort of Git aspects of it. But then obviously any sort of wider concerns about not necessarily using more sort of industry standard things that NHS analysts are used to, like RStudio and VS Code or Jupyter Notebooks. I know that there is an RConnect app in FDP and you can use Jupyter, but they're not Spark supported. So there's sort of limitations in terms of how much data you can put in there.
So good question. I mean, from our perspective, we're really early on the journey with that, and people are just starting to get to grips with how to use some of the tools. Just starting to get to grips with, you know, so we're you know, onboarding some of our data at the moment around things like UEC, creating our ECDS and things like that. So we haven't really gone into tons of detail with this yet. And I've got people who are sort of doing elements of data science, but we've not really established exactly how we do this. We work in a really iterative way though. So we'll definitely be testing the water on that very soon. I think when it comes to things like worries about not using industry standard stuff and it being very Palantir specific, I think the principles of data science and analytics and data engineering are largely the same regardless of the software. And also the software that they've produced does enable you to use things like R, Python, Spark, Jupyter, things like that, with some limitations, as you've mentioned. So I think that as long as people are learning the principles of what they're doing, they can definitely apply them to other things. I think a lot of this is definitely going to be, it'll be what we make it as analysts, as analytical professionals. So if we want to make sure that people are not getting de-skilled in certain areas, then it's our responsibility to make sure we don't get de-skilled in those areas. I don't think there's anything in the software that would prevent people from learning those attributes. And actually, I think it'll do more for analysts in that, because it'll expose more of, this is how your data is actually structured in the background, this is your data lineage and what that looks like. And actually, I think it'll teach people more about what good data structure looks like as well, which is actually a really good foundation for analytics. So don't know whether that's answered any of your question or not there, but that's kind of how I'm thinking about it at the moment.
That's really interesting. Thanks, Matthew.
Right. Thank you. Okay, we're 1 o'clock. I think what we will do is we'll do another session later in the year, towards the end of the year, and maybe bring in someone from the ICB, possibly Jack, who's got the ICB view of the same system as Matt's provider view, because they can vary quite a bit. So thank you, everyone. The recording will be on the website, and that's it. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.